And humanity. Humanity took its place among the stars. No longer the outsiders, the wild cards, but true partners in the great dance of civilizations. They had proved their worth, had shown the galaxy the true meaning of courage and honor, and they would never be forgotten. On Earth, the news of the victory was greeted with joy and celebration, the streets filling with cheering crowds and impromptu parades. But amidst the revelry there was a somber note, a quiet remembrance of the fallen heroes who had made it all possible. In the heart of New York City, a great memorial was erected, a towering monument of gleaming metal and polished stone. At its base, the names of the fallen were inscribed, a roll call of valor that stretched from Earth to the stars. And at the very top, a single name was carved in letters of gold, a shining beacon of hope and inspiration for all who looked upon it. Commander Amara Diallo. Years later, a young girl stood before the memorial, her eyes wide with wonder as she traced the letters of Diallo's name. Her mother stood beside her, a sad smile on her face as she remembered the friend and comrade she had lost so long ago. She was a hero, wasn't she? The girl asked, her voice soft with awe. The mother nodded, her eyes misting with tears. She was, she said softly, the greatest hero of them all. The girl was silent for a moment, her brow furrowed in thought. Then, slowly, she reached out and placed her hand on the cool metal of the monument, her fingers curling around the letters of Diallo's name. "I want to be like her," she said, her voice ringing with determination. "I want to be a hero too." The mother smiled, her heart swelling with pride and love. "You will be," she said softly, placing her hand over her daughter's. "You will be." And as the sun set over the city, casting the memorial in a soft, golden glow, the mother and daughter stood together, united by the legacy of a hero and the promise of a brighter tomorrow. For Commander Amara Diallo was gone, but her spirit lived on, a shining beacon of hope and courage that would guide humanity and the galaxy for generations to come. And as long as her name was remembered, as long as her sacrifice was honored, the light of her heroism would never fade. The end. In the void of space, the final battle raged, a maelstrom of fire and fury that lit the stars like the birth of a new sun. The Allied fleet, human and council ships fighting as one, hurled themselves against the Zorgan lines, their weapons blazing with the fury of the righteous. At the heart of the chaos, the UES Endeavour surged forward, her hull scared and battered, but her spirit unbroken. On her bridge, Admiral Petrov stood tall, his eyes fixed on the view screen, his heart pounding with the thrill of the fight. "Status report," he barked, his voice cutting through the clamor of battle. "Shields at 40%, replied the tactical officer, his fingers flying over his console. "Main batteries firing at full capacity." Petrov nodded, his jaw set with grim determination. They were giving as good as they got. But the Zorgans were relentless, their ships pressing the attack with a ferocity born of desperation and rage. "Admiral," the sensor officer cried out, her voice sharp with alarm. "I'm picking up a massive energy surge from the Zorgan flagship. They're preparing to fire their main weapon." Petrov's eyes widened, his mind racing with the implications. The Zorgan weapon, a monstrous device capable of wiping out entire fleets in a single blast. If they fired now, with the Allied ships so close. Evasive maneuvers. He roared, his voice cracking with urgency. "All ships, break formation. Get clear of the flagship." But even as the fleet scattered, desperate to escape the impending doom, Petrov knew it was too late. The Zorgan weapon was powering up, its muzzle glowing with an eerie, sickly light. And then, in a blinding flash of brilliance, a lone ship hurtled out of the chaos, its engines flaring with the brightness of a newborn star. It was a council vessel, small and swift, and on a collision course with the Zorgan flagship. "What the hell?" Petrov breathed, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Who is that?" "It's the Sword of Unity," the comms officer exclaimed, her voice thrumming with awe. "Grand Admiral Zeren. He's ramming the flagship." Petrov could only stare, his heart in his throat, as the tiny ship bore down on the massive Zorgan vessel, its hull glowing with the heat of re-entry. And then, with a blinding flash of light, the two ships collided, and the flagship erupted in a cataclysmic explosion that shook the very fabric of space. For a moment, there was silence, a stunned hush that fell over the battlefield like a shroud. And then, as the debris of the flagship rained down upon the Zorgan fleet, a great cry went up from the Allied ships, a roar of triumph and defiance that echoed across the stars. "The flagship is destroyed," the tactical officer shouted, his voice cracking with emotion. "The Zorgan fleet is breaking apart." Petrov felt a wild, savage joy welling up within him, a fierce exultation that burned in his veins like fire. They had done it. Against all odds, against all hope, they had beaten the Zorgans, had shattered their power forever. But even as he savored the moment of victory, his thoughts turned to the fallen, to Commander Diallo, to Grand Admiral Zeren, to all the brave souls who had given their lives to make this moment possible. They were the true heroes, the ones who had sacrificed everything for the sake of the galaxy. And their memory would live on forever. "All ships," he said, his voice soft with reverence and sorrow, "stand down from battle stations. The war is over, and we have won." In the days and weeks that followed, the galaxy began to heal, the scars of war slowly fading beneath the light of a new era. The Galactic Council, once shattered and divided, was reborn, its races united by the bonds of shared sacrifice and common purpose. Krolux hissed in rage, his claws tightening on his staff. "Impudent primate, you dare threaten me on my own bridge?" "I dare," Diallo shot back, her eyes flashing with fire. "In the name of Earth and the Galactic Council, I dare." And with a wordless cry, she leaped forward, her blade slashing through the air. In the void of space, the tide of battle shifted, the Zorgan fleet thrown into sudden disarray as word of the attack on their flagship spread like wildfire. On the bridge of the Endeavour, Admiral Petrov watched in disbelief as the enemy formation broke apart, their ships scattering like leaves before a storm. "What the hell is going on over there?" he muttered, his eyes fixed on the tactical display. "Sir," the comms officer called out, her voice thrumming with excitement. "Incoming transmission from the Zorgan flagship. It's Commander Diallo." Petrov's eyes widened, his heart leaping in his chest. "Put her through." The view screen flickered, resolving into an image that would be burned into Petrov's memory for the rest of his days. There, on the smoke-filled bridge of the flagship, stood Diallo, battered and bloodied, but alive. And at her feet, the broken body of the Zorgan commander, his reptilian eyes staring sightlessly at the ceiling. "Admiral," Diallo said, her voice rough with exhaustion and triumph, "the flagship is secure. Krolux is dead, and the Zorgan fleet is in chaos." Petrov felt a grin spreading across his face, a fierce, savage joy welling up within him. "Commander, you magnificent bastard, you did it." But even as he spoke, a flicker of movement caught his eye, and his heart turned to ice in his chest. There, on the view screen, a lone Zorgan warrior rose from the shadows behind Diallo, a jagged blade clutched in his claws. "Diallo," Petrov shouted, his voice cracking with desperation. "Behind you." But it was too late. The blade flashed, a spray of crimson splattering across the screen, and Diallo crumpled, her sword clattering to the deck. For a moment, Petrov could only stare in horror, his mind reeling with the shock of it. Diallo, the bravest warrior he had ever known, the hero who had turned the tide of the war, gone, in an instant of treachery and spite. But as he watched, a flicker of movement caught his eye once more, and his breath caught in his throat. There on the screen, Diallo stirred, her hand groping for her fallen sword. With a titanic effort, she surged to her feet, the blade flashing in her grip. And before the Zorgan could react, she struck. a single perfect blow that clove the warrior's head from his shoulders. For a moment, she stood there, swaying on her feet, her eyes glazed with pain and shock. Then, slowly, she raised her sword in salute, a final gesture of defiance and victory. "Admiral," she rasped, her voice a whisper on the edge of oblivion. "The flagship is secure. Mission accomplished." And with that, she crumpled to the deck, and the screen went dark. In the silence that followed, Petrov could only stare at the empty view screen, his heart hammering in his chest. Diallo, the hero of the hour, the savior of the galaxy, was gone. But her sacrifice, her courage, would live on forever. "All ships," he said, his voice soft with grief and pride, "prepare to re-engage the enemy. We've got a war to win, and a legacy to uphold." And as the fleet surged forward, their weapons blazing with renewed fury, Petrov knew that nothing would ever be the same. The galaxy had been changed forever, and the name of Commander Amara Diallo would echo through the ages, a shining beacon of hope and heroism in the darkest of times. The corridors of the Zorgan flagship were a labyrinth of shadows and death, echoing with the clash of weapons and the cries of the dying. At the head of the strike team, Commander Diallo fought like a woman possessed, her plasma sword a blur of light as she cut through the enemy ranks like a scythe through wheat. Behind her, the mixed force of human and council warriors pressed forward, their faces grim with determination. They had come too far, sacrificed too much, to fail now. And they would see their mission through, no matter the cost. "Bridge should be just ahead," shouted Lyran, the arachnid warrior, his mandibles clicking in anticipation. "If we can take out the command crew." Diallo nodded, her eyes never leaving the corridor ahead. "We'll throw the whole fleet into chaos. It's our only—" She trailed off, her gaze snapping to a shadowed alcove as a flicker of movement caught her eye. "Look out!" But it was too late. From the darkness, a hail of plasma bolts erupted, scything through the strike team's ranks. Lyran went down with a cry, his exoskeleton shattering under the impact. Beside him, a human marine crumpled, her armor smoking from a dozen mortal wounds. Diallo gritted her teeth, her sword flashing as she deflected the incoming fire. "Take cover," she yelled, diving behind a bulkhead as another volley of bolts sizzled past her head. Suppressing fire, now. The strike team responded with a fusillade of their own, their weapons spitting light and fury into the shadows. For a moment, the corridor was a storm of fire and death. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, the ambush was over, the last of the Zorgan defenders falling silent. Diallo rose cautiously, her sword at the ready. "Everyone all right?" she called, her eyes scanning the smoke-filled corridor. A chorus of affirmatives came back, tinged with pain and grief for the fallen. They had survived, but at a cost. Half the team lay dead or dying, their blood mingling on the deck plates. Diallo closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of their sacrifice pressing down on her. But there was no time for mourning, no time for doubt. The mission had to go on. "All right," she said, her voice hard as steel. "Let's finish this. For the fallen, and for the future." On the bridge of the Zorgan flagship, Commander Kroluk stood amidst the chaos of battle, his reptilian eyes cold and calculating. Around him, his crew worked frantically, coordinating the fleet's movements and directing the flow of the fight. "Status report," he hissed, his tongue flicking out to taste the air. "Human fleet is falling back," replied his tactical officer, a massive hulking brute of a creature. "Their ships are taking heavy damage, but they're still fighting." Krolux nodded, his claws tapping against the hilt of his command staff. "And the council vessels, regrouping near the jump point. It seems they mean to flee, and leave their human allies to die." A cruel smile spread across Krolux's scaled features. "Excellent. The fools have played right into our hands." He turned to his communications officer, his eyes glinting with malice. "Relay orders to all ships. Concentrate fire on the human vessels. I want them burnt from the sky." But before the order could be given, the bridge doors exploded inward, a storm of shrapnel and smoke billowing into the command center. Through the haze, a lone figure emerged, her plasma sword blazing with deadly light. "Zorgan Commander," Diallo roared, her voice ringing with challenge. "Your reign of terror ends here." Around them, the council ships rallied, their battered hulls surging forward with renewed purpose. Together, human and alien, they fought as one, a united front against the darkness that sought to consume them all. But even as they pushed the Zorgans back, even as they bought precious time for the council survivors to escape, Petrov knew it was only the beginning. The Zorgans were too many, their weapons too powerful, and the battle was far from over. "Admiral," Commander Diallo's voice was hoarse with exhaustion and strain, "we're taking heavy damage. Shields are failing, and we're down to our last missiles." Petrov gritted his teeth, his eyes never leaving the tactical display. "Recommendations, Commander." Diallo hesitated, her gaze flickering to the writhing mass of Zorgan ships still bearing down on them. "Sir, we've done all we can here. The council ships are clear, but if we stay any longer—" She didn't need to finish the sentence. Petrov knew what she was saying, knew the cold, hard calculus of war. They had bought time for their allies, had struck a blow against the enemy. But now it was time to cut their losses before they were overwhelmed. "Sound the retreat," he said, the words tasting like ashes in his mouth. "All ships, fall back to the jump point. We'll regroup, and—" He trailed off, his eyes widening in sudden realization. "Comms, raise the sword of unity. Tell Zoran. Tell him we have an idea." It was a desperate plan, a gambit born of equal parts audacity and desperation. As the human fleet fell back, drawing the Zorgans away from the battered council ships, a small strike team slipped away from the Endeavor, their shuttle darting through the chaos of the battle towards the looming bulk of the Zorgan flagship. At their head was Commander Diallo, her face set in grim determination as she clutched the hilt of her plasma sword. Beside her, a hand-picked team of human and council warriors, united by a common purpose and a shared destiny. Their mission was simple, but far from easy: to board the flagship, fight their way to the bridge, and take out the Zorgan commander, throwing the enemy fleet into disarray. It was a suicide mission, but it was the only chance they had. As the shuttle hurtled towards the flagship, dodging enemy fire and debris, Diallo closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the moment settling on her shoulders. She thought of Earth, of the billions of souls counting on her, and of the brave men and women fighting and dying at her side. "For Earth," she whispered, her grip tightening on her sword. "For the Council, and for the future." And with a final defiant roar, the shuttle slammed into the flagship's hull, and the battle was joined once more. In the grand chambers of the Galactic Council, an air of despair hung heavy as the leaders of the various member races gathered for an emergency session. The once proud faces of the assembled diplomats were now etched with lines of worry and fear, their eyes haunted by the specter of impending doom. At the center of the room, a holographic display flickered to life, casting an eerie glow over the proceedings. It showed a vast armada of Zorgan warships, their angular hulls bristling with weapons, relentlessly advancing through the void of space. The Zorgan Empire, long the scourge of the galaxy, had finally launched its most audacious offensive yet, a full-scale invasion of the Council's territory. "This is it, then," muttered the Arachnid ambassador, her mandibles clicking nervously. "The Zorgans have broken through our last line of defense. They'll be at our doorstep within cycles." "Impossible!" exclaimed the crystalline delegate, his faceted eyes flashing with disbelief. "Our combined fleets should have been able to hold them at the Kirax Nebula." "What happened?" The avian counselor, resplendent in her iridescent plumage, shook her head sadly. "The Zorgans, they unleashed a new weapon, something we've never seen before. It tore through our shields like they were nothing. Our ships, they didn't stand a chance. A grim silence fell over the chamber as the implications sank in. The Galactic Council, the great bulwark of peace and unity that had stood for eons, was on the verge of collapse. The Zorgans, with their vast numbers and now their terrifying new technology, seemed unstoppable. "What can we do?" asked the reptilian representative, his scaled visage grim. "Our worlds are already overcrowded with refugees. Our resources are stretched to the breaking point. If the Zorgans break through here, then it's over," finished the insectoid queen, her antennae drooping in resignation. "The Galactic Council will fall, and the Zorgans will rule the galaxy unopposed." As despair threatened to engulf the assembled leaders, a lone figure stood up from the shadows at the back of the chamber. Clad in a simple black robe, its features obscured by a deep hood, the figure stepped forward into the light. "There may yet be hope," the figure said, its voice a soft, ethereal whisper that somehow carried to every corner of the vast room. The counselors turned to face the speaker, their expressions ranging from curiosity to outright skepticism. "Who are you?" demanded the arachnid ambassador. "And what do you mean, hope? We've exhausted every option." The figure reached up and slowly lowered its hood, revealing a face that was at once ancient and ageless, its features an uncanny blend of the various races present. "I am the Overseer," the figure said simply. "I have watched over this council since its inception, guiding from the shadows. And I tell you now, there is one possibility we have not yet explored." The crystalline delegate scoffed. "We've tried everything. What could we possibly have overlooked?" The Overseer fixed him with a piercing gaze. "Humanity." A ripple of shock and disbelief ran through the assembled counselors. "Humans?" sputtered the avian. "You can't be serious. They're primitives, barely capable of interstellar travel. What could they possibly offer against the might of the Zorgan Empire?" The Overseer smiled enigmatically. "The humans are young. Yes, they are brash, unpredictable, even reckless at times. But they possess a quality that is all too rare in this ancient galaxy of ours, the indomitable will to fight against impossible odds, to snatch victory from the jaws of defeat." The reptilian representative looked thoughtful. "I've heard stories about the humans. They are tenacious, to say the least. But even so, what difference could they make against the Zorgans?" "The difference," said the Overseer, "between extinction and survival." It turned to face the council at large. "I propose that we send an envoy to the humans to plead for their aid in this, our darkest hour. It is a chance, nothing more. But it is the only chance we have left." For a long moment, the chamber was silent as the counselors exchanged uncertain glances. The thought of turning to the humans, a species they had long dismissed as beneath their notice, was galling. But the specter of annihilation loomed large. Finally, the arachnid ambassador spoke. "I don't like it," she said bluntly. "But I like the alternative even less. I say we put it to a vote." One by one, the counselors signaled their assent, some reluctantly, others with a glimmer of desperate hope. The Overseer nodded solemnly. "It is decided, then. We will send our plea to the humans and pray that they answer our call." As the council dispersed to make the necessary preparations, the Overseer stood alone in the center of the chamber, its ancient eyes fixed on the stars visible through the vast transparisteel viewport. "And so it begins," it murmured softly. "The final gambit, the last roll of the cosmic dice. May the universe smile upon us all." On a distant blue planet, orbiting an unremarkable yellow star, the humans went about their lives, blissfully unaware of the desperate plea racing across the light years towards them. They worked and played, laughed and cried, loved and dreamed, ignorant of the fact that the fate of the galaxy would soon rest in their hands. But the call was coming, a clarion cry from the depths of space, a summons to a destiny beyond imagining. And when it arrived, nothing would ever be the same again, for the humans, or for the galaxy at large. The countdown to the final confrontation had begun, and only one question remained. Would humanity rise to meet its greatest challenge, Or would the light of civilization be extinguished forever, plunging the stars into an endless night of Zorgan domination? The Galactic Council had gambled everything on a species they barely understood, a wild card in the game of galactic politics. But as the Overseer well knew, sometimes it was the most unexpected pieces on the board that held the key to victory, or to utter defeat. The die was cast, the call sent forth. All that remained was to wait and to hope. Dr. Lena Mavros squinted at her computer screen, her brow furrowed in concentration. The signal had come again, a burst of exotic particles that danced across the detectors of the Hawking U Deep Space Observatory. It was like nothing she had ever seen before, a whisper from the void that hinted at mysteries beyond human ken. "What do you make of it, Lena?" asked her colleague, Dr. Kai Nakamura, as he leaned over her shoulder to peer at the data. "Some kind of natural phenomenon." Lena shook her head. "I don't think so. Look at the pattern, the way it repeats. There's intelligence behind this, Kai. Something or someone is trying to communicate with us." Kai's eyes widened. "You mean aliens? Actual, honest-to-goodness extraterrestrials?" "I know it sounds crazy," Lena said, her voice trembling with a mix of excitement and trepidation. "But what else could it be? We've ruled out every known natural source. This is something new, something extraordinary." As the two scientists stared at the screen, the signal pulsed again, stronger this time. And with a sudden, heart-stopping clarity, the message resolved itself into a string of words, written in perfect, unaccented English. "To the people of Earth, we need your help." The message spread like wildfire, leaping from screen to screen, from mouth to mouth, until it seemed the whole world was abuzz with the news. Aliens were real, and they were calling out to humanity in their hour of need. In boardrooms and war rooms, in streets and homes, the debate raged. Some called for caution, for restraint, citing the countless unknowns. Others clamored for action, arguing that humanity had a moral imperative to answer the call. And still others saw opportunity, a chance for power and profit on a galactic scale. But as the arguments swirled and the factions jockeyed for position, one voice cut through the tumult like a clarion call. It was the voice of Dr. Eliza Katri, renowned astrophysicist and one of the most respected figures in the global scientific community. "My fellow humans," she said, her image broadcast on every screen and holopad across the planet. "We stand at a crossroads, a moment of decision that will echo through the ages. Out there, among the stars, a civilization cries out for our aid. They have reached across the gulf of space to us, not in conquest or domination, but in desperate plea for help." She paused, her dark eyes shining with conviction. "I know we are afraid. I know we have our doubts and our divisions. But I ask you this, what does it say about us, as a species, if we turn away from those in need? What does it say about our place in the universe, if we refuse the call to be something greater than ourselves?" Dr. Caffrey's voice grew softer, but no less intense. "The road ahead will not be easy. The challenges we face will test us to our limits and beyond. But I know that we are ready, that the human spirit, in all its flawed and fractious glory, is equal to this moment." She lifted her chin, her gaze seeming to pierce the very heavens. "So I say to you, let us rise. Let us take our place among the stars, not as conquerors, but as protectors and peacemakers. Let us show the galaxy the true mettle of humanity. For if we do not, who will?" In the days and weeks that followed, a great marshaling of resources and personnel took place. The nations of Earth, setting aside their squabbles and rivalries, came together as never before to assemble a fleet of ships and supplies for the monumental task ahead. From the shipyards of Earth, a ragtag armada took shape, a motley collection of vessels ranging from sleek, purpose-built warships to lumbering freighters pressed into service. They were crewed by the best and brightest humanity had to offer. Scientists and soldiers, diplomats and dreamers, all united by a common purpose. Leading them was Admiral Niko Petrov, a grizzled veteran of the Sino-Russian War and a legend in his own time. He stood on the bridge of his flagship, the UES Endeavour, his steel-gray eyes fixed on the viewscreen as the fleet assembled in high Earth orbit. "Never thought I'd see the day," he murmured, half to himself. "Humans and aliens standing together against a common foe. If you told me this was how I'd go out, I'd have called you a damn fool." His second-in-command, Commander Amaradiello, flashed him a grin. "Well, sir, sometimes the universe has a way of surprising us. Who knows? Maybe this is just the beginning." Admiral Petrov snorted. "Beginning of what, Commander? A new age of peace and understanding, or a whole new kind of war, fought on a scale we can't even imagine?" Amara's grin faded, replaced by a look of sober determination. "Either way, sir, we'll be ready. Whatever comes, we'll face it together." The Admiral nodded, his weathered face creasing into a smile. "Dan right we will. The galaxy won't know what hit it." He turned to face his crew, his voice ringing out across the bridge. "All right, people. Let's show these Zorgan bastards what happens when you mess with the human race. Engage jump drives, and let's bring our new friends some reinforcements." With a flare of pseudo-motion, the fleet leaped forward, hurtling into the darkness between the stars. Earth dwindled behind them, a blue-green jewel in the infinite black. But ahead, a galaxy awaited, and a destiny yet to be written. The call had been sent, and humanity had answered. For better or worse, the fate of worlds would turn on the choices they made in the days to come. But one thing was certain. The universe would never be the same. The void of space stretched out before them, an infinite expanse of darkness punctuated by the cold, hard light of distant stars. On the bridge of the UES Endeavour, Admiral Petrov stood impassive, his eyes fixed on the tactical display as the fleet hurtled through the jump point towards their rendezvous with destiny. "ETA to Galactic Council coordinates," he barked, his voice cutting through the tense silence. 15 minutes, sir," replied the navigation officer, her fingers flying over her console. "We're coming up on the Kirax Nebula now." Petrov nodded, his jaw clenched tight. They were heading into the unknown, into a war that wasn't their own. But there was no turning back now. Humanity had made its choice, and for better or worse, they would see it through to the end. "Admiral," the sensor officer's voice was sharp with alarm. "I'm picking up massive energy signatures ahead. It looks like a battle, sir. A big one." Petrov's eyes narrowed. On screen, the view screen flickered, resolving into a scene of utter chaos. Titanic warships clashed against the backdrop of the roiling nebula, energy beams and missile salvos crisscrossing the void in a dazzling, deadly light show. And in the midst of it all, a beleaguered cluster of vessels bearing the sigil of the Galactic Council, fighting desperately against the overwhelming might of the Zorgan Armada. "Mother of God," breathed Commander Diallo, her face ashen. "We're too late. They're being slaughtered out there." For a moment, Admiral Petrov was silent, his eyes taking in the carnage with a kind of grim fascination. Then, slowly, he shook his head. "No," he said, his voice like granite. "We're not too late. Not yet." He turned to face his crew, his expression set in lines of unshakable resolve. "This is what we came for, people. This is why we crossed the stars. To stand with those who need us, and to show the Zorgans what happens when you piss off the human race." A ragged cheer went up from the bridge crew, a sound of defiance and determination that echoed through the ship like a battle cry. Petrov let it wash over him, feeling the weight of history on his shoulders, and the thrill of the fight singing in his blood. "Comms," he snapped. "Hail the Council flagship. Tell them the cavalry's here, and we're ready to dance." On the bridge of the Galactic Council dreadnought Sword of Unity, Grand Admiral Zaren stood amidst the smoke and ruin, his crystalline face etched with the lines of 1,000 battles. Around him, his crew fought on with the desperate courage of the doomed, manning their stations even as the ship shuddered and burned beneath the Zorgan onslaught. "Shields down to 15%, cried the tactical officer, his insectoid mandibles clicking in agitation. "We can't take much more of this." Zaren closed his eyes, feeling the weight of centuries pressing down upon him. He had fought the Zorgans for longer than most civilizations had existed, had seen the rise and fall of empires, but never had he faced a foe so implacable, so relentless. And now, at the end of all things, he found himself wondering if it had all been for nothing. "Grand Admiral," the communications officer's voice was shrill with disbelief. "We're being hailed by a human ship." Zaren's eyes snapped open, his crystalline fingers tightening on the hilt of his ceremonial sword. "What? They say they're here to help, that they've come to stand with us against the Zorgans." For a moment, Zaren was silent, his mind reeling with the implications. The humans, the primitives, the wild cards of the galactic stage. He had dismissed them, as had so many others, as beneath notice, unworthy of consideration. But now they were here, in the thick of the fighting, risking everything to come to the aid of a people they barely knew. It was an act of courage, of selflessness, that stirred something deep within the old warrior's soul. "Very well," he said, his voice ringing out across the bridge. "Open a channel." He straightened his shoulders, his eyes blazing with a newfound fire. "This is Grand Admiral Zaren of the Galactic Council. To the humans, we welcome your aid and your valor. Together, let us show these Zorgan dogs the true meaning of unity." The battle raged on, the fury of the Zorgan assault redoubling as the human fleet plunged into the fray. Admiral Petrov led the charge, the Endeavor blazing a path of destruction through the enemy ranks, its guns and missiles fitting fire into the void.